This is that the dura mater right here is number 9, and we know this is a dura mater because it's continuous with the dorsal root ganglia, the ventral root, and the spinal nerve as it exits outwards. Adherent to the dura mater is this inner lining of the arachnoid mater. Right? The arachnoid mater in normal life, it will be closely adherent to the dura mater due to the presence of cerebrospinal fluid in the subarachnoid space. That CSF allows you to push that arachnoid mater so that it's very intimate with the dura mater. The most intimate and the most deep of our meningeal layers is a pia mater, and that's what we see as the white external outline covering the spinal cord itself. The spinal cord, like the brain, is going to be split in half, right? Where the brain has one longitudinal fissure, the spinal cord actually has two different segments. One, this is the posterior median sulcus, separating the two parts of the posterior column. Then you have the anterior median fissure, separating the anterior median column right here, right? Now, the columns are the white matter that are found within the spinal cord. This is the dorsal column, lateral column, anterior column, or ventral column. Columns right here are purely carrying myelinated axons, either ascending for sensation or descending for motor functions. So we're going to start talking about those columns in chapter 14 and 15, so we'll go into more detail at that point. Now, you do have horns here, which are consistent of cell bodies and unmyelinated axons of the cell bodies, right? The cell bodies here on the anterior horn are be carrying motor signals. So on the anterior or ventral horn, you'll see cell bodies for your what we call our lower motor neurons. Then you'll have the lateral horn. They're carrying sympathetic messages, right? So this is our lateral horn. It's going to be carrying sympathetic cell bodies that will then have axons that exits out through the front as well. Remember, all motor signals, regardless of whether it's sympathetic or somatic, they're all going to exit out through the ventral root towards the front. The posterior or dorsal horn right here will contain cell bodies for our secondary neurons for sensation. Remember, it takes 3 neurons to bring that information of sensation to our postcentral gyrus. So this is a second neuron, right? It will synapse, and then it's going to have an axon that moves upwards into the thalamus where it crosses over, right? As we move forward here, you're going to see the ventral root carrying motor signals that is both somatic and autonomic, purely sympathetic in function. In the back, you have the dorsal root carrying purely sensory information in towards the spinal cord, right? If we look closer yet, you see the dorsal root ganglia. Well, these are the cell bodies of the sensory neurons that help form your dorsal root. So you see the axons coming in, axons extending out. Well, those axons have to be attached to the cell body somewhere, and here's where the cell bodies are. So the cell bodies of our sensory neurons are found in the dorsal root ganglia, right? As we exit outwards, you will see that this is a region right here that we form the spinal nerve. At the spinal nerve level, all the sensory and all the motor signals will start to mix with each other. So by the time we exit out and we form the dorsal and the ventral ramus, all of these fibers are now mixed, right? They're going to have sensory and motor signals going through the dorsal ramus. You're going to have the ventral ramus, and it's also going to contain sensory and motor signals. Now, when we have the sympathetic nervous system, right, we have cells in the lateral horn. They're going to have axons that exits out through the ventral root because it's still motor function. As it exits out, it has to go through the spinal nerve, follow the ventral ramus, and then follow this connection. This is called the communicating rami, right? The axon exits out the communicating rami where it's going to synapse with a secondary neuron, which will then make contact with our targeted sympathetic organ, whether it's a heart, the eye, the GI tract. The sympathetic ganglion is a very long series of cell bodies that are very, very close to the spinal cord, right? And those sympathetic ganglia are going to contain cell bodies that then has axons that will then go to the heart. They'll go to the lungs. They'll go to the eyes even. So then you have a global response when we have sympathetic activity.